of new studies suggest older adults are more lonely than they used to be. The American Psychological Association found, on average, that reported loneliness begins to increase after the age of 75. But loneliness is an issue, in fact, for all generations. A separate study from 2018 found that 46% of all adults in the U.S. sometimes or always feel lonely, and 43% feel isolated from others. Dr. Sue Varma is a psychiatrist, and she consults on depression, anxiety disorders, and work-life balance issues, and she joins us now. This is a major issue, and there's a lot of theories out there. You know, there's a comedian named Gary Goldman who does this bit about shopping at Trader Joe's, and he talks about the point of connection when he's got his bag of groceries and the clerk holds the credit card receipt so he can sign it, and it's a little teamwork act, and how that's like a moment of connection.
Yes. Oh, wow.
I think about that because we shop online now, church attendance is declining, civic organizations are going away. Is that what's going on here?
Yes. And, you know, I think there was an interesting article in The Atlantic about how the landline was a point of connection in the home as a family, right? So these micro conversations, let's never minimize the importance of it. And I think what's happening when we look at that study from 2018, it's the extremes of ages. We're talking about 18 to 22-year-olds, the Generation Z that feels lonely, because what they're missing is the in-person, in real-life connections, right? So even though we're more connected on social media, I think of it as empty calories, where if you can't take it offline, because when we look at relationships, we need to have shared experiences, right? So when you're going through hardship, you're going through crisis, whether it's a bonding experience through boarding school, boot camp, graduate school, parenting, whatever it is, if you're not having in real life meaningful exchanges where you're vulnerable with somebody, where you're forming a deep connection, you're really missing out on opportunities.
One government agency is calling this an epidemic. I mean, what are the warning signs for someone who is facing this?
Yeah. So, you know, first of all, it's really important to separate social isolation from loneliness. Loneliness is a subjective quality, and it has to do with whether you're with people or without. There are people who are in marriages where they're feeling conflicted, they're not getting their needs met, and they feel lonely. So just because you're surrounded by other people, don't assume that the other person is not lonely. So ask them questions like, do you feel like other people are not with you? Do you feel like other people don't understand you? Do you have difficulty forming meaningful relationships? Because there are people who are very social and chatty and party-like and outgoing, and you're like, they cannot be lonely. But they are, because they're not establishing deep and meaningful connections. Trust.
What's the borderline, Sue, between loneliness and depression?
And it's hard because they often go hand in hand. Loneliness increases the risk for depression, and people who are depressed may perceive themselves to be lonely, but they may not necessarily be. It's a perception. But in depression, you see low energy, low mood, low concentration, an inability to get out of bed, to want to do things, or you might be high functioning and still be feeling depressed, but that there's a depressed mood. A loneliness may be a state of feeling that comes and goes, but depression is something that stays over a period of 2 weeks or more and affects your functioning. Lonely people can still function. That's the difference.
I understand why this might be affecting young people. They're online all the time. They're not engaging with each other face to face. But why older Americans?
Yes. So what's very interesting to me is look at the people who are protected the most, right? We're talking about generation, baby boomers, 50 to 75. They might be retired, but they're actively engaged in their communities, right? They still have health more or less, and they're involved in retirement. They might be more busy than they are when they were working. But the extremes of age, beyond the age of 75, when you're starting to lose your health and your independence and sense of agency and mastery, which is so important, and people are dying.
Yes, and your friends.
Yes.
Friends.
And your family very often is scattered.
Yes. And you might be somebody sending you to like a nursing home or to a community where you don't know anybody else, and then you're dependent on other people. I feel like maintaining your independence and mobility is so important, physical mobility.
How do you combat this, Sue?
So look at the three things that contribute to loneliness. One is the sense of self. When we think of loneliness, we only think of, are you missing interpersonal relationships? But nobody's talking about how do you feel about yourself. If you don't feel good about yourself, you're going to feel as if I have nothing to offer other people. And social anxiety really causes loneliness. The second piece of it is engaging with other people meaningfully. And the last part of it is something higher outside of yourself.
What can we learn from people who aren't lonely? Who are those people who just seem to have it all?
Yes, they are not self-absorbed. That's the biggest thing, right? Not self-absorbed. The people that are self-absorbed, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but depression causes an inward turn, right? So part of this is saying, what can I do? Even if you're depressed, even if you're feeling lonely, how can I give back to somebody else? Can you get involved in a community? Are you volunteering? What I love to do is pair teenagers or young people in the Generation Z, the lonely, with the oldest group, right? Both people are lonely, but both have so much to add. When you put teens and sort of grandparents together, everybody benefits.
There's one factoid that really underscores the stakes here. Loneliness is compared to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It really affects your physical health.
Absolutely.
Get out there and connect.
Absolutely.
Dr. Sue Varma, thank you so much for being with us.